Hello, my name is Sara Dolnicar. I'm a professor at the University of Queensland in Australia, and I lead the Low Harm Hedonism Initiative. The aim of this initiative is to make people behave in more environmentally sustainable ways in enjoyment-focused contexts, such as on vacations. Today, I will present a few simple measures, interventions as we call them, for hotels to make their operations more sustainable. Some of them we have developed. Some were developed by other researchers around the world. You can find all the references on the last slide of this presentation. Most of the interventions I will talk about today are targeted at tourists. All of them are designed to not reduce guest satisfaction, and many have the nice side effect of saving hotels money as well. But let's go one step back. Why does the tourism industry have to become more environmentally sustainable? We know that the tourism industry contributes hugely to GDP, around 10% globally. It's also responsible for 1 in every 10 jobs in the world. But these critically important economic contributions come at a cost. Tourism is the 5th most polluting industry. It generates 8% of global CO2 emissions and contributes up to 12.5% to global warming. The tourism industry also produces 35 million tons of solid waste every year and uses a huge amount of water. Catering to 1 hotel guest for 1 night uses, on average, 300 liters of water. This is not because hotel guests shower unreasonably long, although many do actually, but rather because hotels often have gardens that need to be landscaped, pools that need to be refilled, and in-house laundries to wash towels and linen. Clearly, there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of the environmental sustainability of the tourism industry to ensure that it can continue to make a key contribution to nations and communities around the world without burdening the environment quite as much. As we try to improve environmental sustainability, who should we target? Who can make a difference? Governments could simply prohibit environmentally unsustainable practices. This is increasingly happening now, but we cannot rely on the governments solely, because businesses do not appreciate governments interfering with their operations. The tourism industry could self-regulate and put measures in place to reduce the negative environmental impacts of their operations. Ultimately, however, service providers want to offer the best possible service to their guests, and they want to make a profit. These two aims are often incompatible, or seen as incompatible, with the introduction of pro-environmental measures. That leaves the tourist as the possible target for interventions that change behavior. Can this be done? Can we make tourists behave in more sustainable ways during their vacation, a time when enjoyment and relaxation is the only thing on their minds? Yes, we can. Here are a few examples of how we can achieve this. We can make tourists waive their routine daily room clean in a hotel by sharing savings with them, rather than preaching to them about the environmental impact of the room clean. The environmental impact of room cleaning is substantial. In a 4-star hotel, 1 routine room clean uses 35 liters of water, 100 milliliters of chemicals, and 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity. These resources are wasted if the room clean is not really needed. Without any incentive, only 3% of hotel guests request for their room not to be cleaned. When hotel guests receive a voucher in exchange for waiving the room clean, about 9% of hotel guests agree not to have their room cleaned. We explained to hotel guests how much a room clean costs and offered to share the savings 50-50 if they waived the daily room clean. The guest's half was refunded in the form of a drinks voucher. This simple modification led to a 42% reduction in room cleans, saving the hotel quite a bit of money. Importantly, this intervention did not reduce guest satisfaction. Out of interest, we added to the explanation and the drinks information about the negative environmental impact of each room clean. We expected that this would further increase the number of people waiving the room clean. This was not the case, suggesting that the sharing argument was much more powerful in triggering behavioral change than preaching about the environment. We can also make tourists waive their room clean by changing the default. Instead of cleaning rooms every day, we can tell hotel guests that we clean upon demand only. Instead of guests hanging the sign on the door handle of their room when they ask for the room not to be cleaned, they had to use the sign to ask for a clean. There was no cost associated with the requested room clean. Room cleaning dropped by 63%, and guest satisfaction did not drop at all. Huge savings for the hotel with no additional cost. We can even reduce the shower time of tourists by displaying during their shower the liters of water used in real time. Energy costs associated with heating water to shower temperature dropped by 11%, and there was no effect on guest satisfaction. We can even make tourists eat up at all-you-can-eat buffets by reducing the plate size. 3 centimeters smaller plates lead to 20% less plate waste. Uneaten food left behind on people's plates at the end of the meal, without reducing guest satisfaction. If we don't want to buy new plates, we can put a simple sign on the dining tables which invites people to return to the buffet as often as they want, pointing out that this is much better than overfilling the plate in one run. Small, cheap intervention, huge effect. Plate waste drops by 21%, and guests are just as satisfied with their all-you-can-eat buffet experience. We can also make families eat up what's on their plate by inviting them to play a simple stamp collection game. Every time the entire family eats up everything that's on their plates, they get a stamp in their collection booklet. If they have a stamp for every day of their stay, they get a prize at checkout. There's nothing like a stamp collection game and a prize to get children to change their behavior. Plate waste dropped by 38% without reducing guest satisfaction. In fact, the kids had a lot of extra holiday fun collecting stamps. And one last example that does not change tourists' behavior, but rather the behavior of cooks. Cooks produce a lot of food waste in the kitchen preparing food. Replacing a large intransparent food waste bin with a smaller transparent bin reduces food waste by 73%. Why? Because cooks are too lazy to empty the bin many times, and because they can see everything that's in the bin, and they often realize that some of it should not have been thrown out. These were just a few examples. I hope you can see that all of the interventions I presented today represent a genuine win-win-win-win situation. They reduce the negative environmental impact of tourism. They save hotels money. They do not affect guest satisfaction. Sometimes they even increase it. And they can help businesses or even destinations to position themselves as being genuinely green. Now let's move on to how tourism businesses and tourism researchers can develop and test more such intervention in future. Importantly, when we test any intervention, we need to measure actual behavior. Why is this so critical? Because people cannot accurately report behaviors that are socially desirable. To give you an example, if you ask boat tourists whether they considered the environmental impact when choosing one of 2 alternative boat tours, 60% say that they did. When you ask the same people whether the boat tour they are on is eco-certified or not, the only indicator of environmental impact visible to the tourists, it turns out that only 14% purchased a ticket for the eco-certified boat and knew that the boat was eco-certified. We cannot rely on what people tell us. We need to measure actual behavior. When we test the effectiveness of newly developed interventions, we must use experimental designs. Here's a little illustration of an experimental design. We can measure plate waste in grams to get a baseline. That's a real behavior. Then we can introduce an intervention. We can reduce plate size and re-measure plate waste and test if plate size reduced plate waste. Because we control the intervention, we can reduce plate size, increase plate size, reduce plate size, increase plate size, while keeping all other things equal. We can conclude that there is a causal effect between plate size and plate waste. This is not the case for survey studies. When we conduct one-off cross-sectional survey studies, we measure all constructs at the same time. So even if they're highly correlated, we do not know what causes what. To conclude, we can design tourism to be more environmentally sustainable without reducing tourists' enjoyment of their vacation and without causing extra cost for tourism businesses. Sometimes we can even save them money. We need tourism researchers to develop and experimentally test interventions that can achieve this, and we need the tourism industry to adopt them. Thank you for listening today. On the next few slides, you will find links to a few more videos you might find interesting, as well as the references I promised you at the beginning of this presentation. Bye.